and lots of younger people are giving the talks, which is wonderful. I was asked whether to offer some topics, and one of the topics I offered was the socially enabled psychopath. And then, of course, since the conference is on cybercrime, or rather on cyber-psychiatry, I said, okay, let's talk about psychopathy in the context of cyberspace. So what I'm going to do is a bit of a melange. I'll be talking a little bit about psychopathy. I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain in psychopathy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the cyber-psychopath. So let's start by talking about The Godfather. Why am I bringing a movie here? Because I believe it's one of the finest depictions of functional psychopathy in popular space that has ever been put out. Now, this was a guy, according to the novel and the movie, born in a small village in Sicily, earned his stripes as someone who, as a young boy who learned to use the gun, and he shot someone important in the village, had to flee, went to New York, was an impoverished immigrant for a while, and then got into the gray underbelly of the New York world, the slum world, and emerged to become a leader. But what was the quality of this leader? One aspect that keeps coming back, whether it's the novel or the movie, is his willingness to negotiate, for he was a reasonable man. And no matter what the problem, he believed you could negotiate the problem. And this was something that will keep coming back as a theme, and we'll talk about that. So what's there in the mind of the average psychopath? The prototypical psychopath has problems with interpersonal relationships, has problems with emotional expression, and has problems with self-control. They gain satisfaction from antisocial or socially deviant behavior, and very importantly, compared to a lot of us, they do not feel any guilt or shame for what they have done. So the absence of sorrow, guilt, remorse, shame, things that we all feel, is something that's very, very distinct. And most of them are able to rationalize their behavior, why they did it, they blame it on others, and or deny it outright. And one very distinct human quality that the psychopath lacks in is empathy. So their ability to understand the impact of their actions on others is extremely poor. And do we have neuroscientific evidence of this? Yes, we've done a lot of studies now where we've looked at the recognition of facial emotion in functional MRI scans. And we are able to see that the psychopath's ability to recognize facial emotion is very different from the ability of the average person. And of course, this has got something to do with the neural loops connecting the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain. So this is something that's very, very distinct about this particular personality. But they have a superficial charm, and many of them will make a distinct, very good first impression on you when you meet them. They come across as very warm, very likable, very gregarious, and very able to engage. But this also comes with a shallow affect, which means that the emotions I am portraying, those are not felt very deeply. Those emotions are very, very superficial emotions. They are gone like that. Quite similar, if you think about it in some ways, to our histrionic personalities in that particular quality. Their behavior is often impulsive and irresponsible. They often fail to keep a job. They often default on debts. They also have a very distorted sense of reality. And this I keep coming back to. People with psychopathic personalities have a distorted sense of the potential consequences of their actions. And they don't recognize the inherent risk of being caught or being injured or being in trouble because of their behavior. One very interesting example, how many of you saw The Serpent on Netflix? So The Serpent is the 8-part series about Charles Sobraj, made by BBC. It's a wonderful watch on Netflix. I very, very strongly recommend it to anyone who is interested in mental health. But one of the last things that Sobraj managed to do, there was only one country in the world where he could be arrested and imprisoned for life, and that was Nepal. Everywhere else, including India, his sentences had run out. He could not have been imprisoned. He chose to go back to Nepal. And that is that last, not being able to recognize the inherent risk of being caught. There's only one country that could give him a death sentence or imprison him for life. And that's exactly where he went back. And he had no particular explanation. When people asked him, why did you go back? He did not really have a particular explanation. He just didn't believe he could be caught. It was as simple as that. And that's very classic psychopathic behavior. So the inability to empathize, to feel their emotions, to share their love, joy, pain, and sorrow in a deep way. So very, very shallow emotions. And if they feel them, extremely fleeting and extremely transient. So much so that it does not really have an impact on themselves. And as a consequence, their ability to emotionally learn and develop as a human being is also very weak. This is something that we have to understand, because if you think about it, it is our empathy, our human interactions with others that lead to the development of our temperaments, our personalities, our ability to, this is why as you get older, for example, you do really feel sorry for people who are in difficult circumstances. You're able to put yourself more and more in their shoes because you yourself have gone through some pain by then. When you're very young, unless you're unlucky, you haven't seen the spectrum of pain in life. As you get older, life gives you the opportunity to feel the spectrum of pain. And it's that experience which makes you empathize more and better with people around you. The psychopath lacks that ability to empathize, and this is something that we need to keep in mind. They also don't see right and wrong in conventional ways, which means that they operate on their own reality framework. They do not fit in with the moral and legal framework that we accept as a society. And if you go back to The Godfather, the movie, he would always justify what he did. And he would justify it as, you betrayed me, or you did not show me respect. So there's one particular scene in the movie where a baker comes to him seeking some help. And he reminds him that when I came to you, you disrespected me. And now you're here sitting in front of me asking for my help. On what basis do you think I will give you my help? So in a sense, it's a very long memory of somebody who disrespected them. And there is this ability also, therefore, to manipulate others. So they write their own rule books, they're very proud, they judge right and wrong in unique ways, and they seldom appear to feel or express remorse for their actions. Now, I give this talk often in the concept of talking about the socially enabled psychopath. And you will recognize, when you read some of these qualities, CEOs of large corporations, successful or unsuccessful. I mean, if you read about how Elon Musk has taken over Twitter, it's rather psychopathic. He really doesn't care. He's the chief wit now. You can do what you want, right? So you recognize these qualities in people in high places. And dare I say, you'll recognize them in deans of medical colleges, you'll recognize them in vice chancellors, you'll recognize them in people who made it to places of power and decision making. And one of the reasons, and we'll talk about that, is probably we do need some of these qualities in order to get to places of power or indeed stay in places of power. And we'll talk about that in some time. So it is this quality of reasonableness which made Vito Corleone almost statesman-like. And if you, I would urge you to go back and watch the movie now that you've listened to this talk. He was very moralistic. He had very strong views on what was appropriate public behavior, on family honor, on what people should do and should not do. He was particular about language and its usage, and he reserved his strongest rebuke in Mamata to, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly in Italian, for markedly offensive situations. And yet he was willing always to negotiate, sit across the table and talk to people, but always on his own terms. Okay. So just to review this, ruthlessness is a very important quality of the psychopathic personality. Distorted reality of the impact of their actions is another very important quality. The ability to manipulate people and situations skillfully is the third important quality. And in this particular character, in this particular caricature of psychopathy, the dispensation of favors always came with a caveat that one day, at an appropriate time, the favor will have to be returned. He would say that repeatedly. I will come to you, and you will not say no to me. That was very, very important. And if you did not do that, you were viewed with contempt, suspicion, and even derision. So this is the type of personality we are talking about. Okay. I won't dwell on this, but it is a rather paradoxical personality in the movie, simply because he exudes certain qualities which make him seem very, very socially enabled. In fact, hyper-enabled in some ways, if I can put it that way. So what do we see here, therefore? From an interpersonal perspective, we are seeing glibness and superficial charm, a grandiose sense of self-worth, the ability to lie pathologically, and to be cunning and manipulative. There's one point I want to make here. The lying is probably not always deliberate. Like our politicians, they've forgotten what they last said. So they believe what they are saying today as opposed to what they were saying 10 days ago, which is why with complete confidence, I was with one political party 10 days ago and the other fellow was an idiot, and now I'm with another political party and that fellow is an idiot, or where I was before was an idiot, and I'm absolutely convinced. I have no problem with it. That comes from there. There's a lack of remorse and guilt when you take the affective items. There is a shallow affect, there is a callousness and a lack of empathy, and there's a failure to accept responsibility. These are qualities that psychopathic personalities come with. The lifestyle items, and this is where the cyber also comes in, they need stimulation. They're very prone for boredom. They do lead a parasitic lifestyle. They have a lack of realistic and long-term goals. They can be very impulsive and irresponsible. And the antisocial items, poor behavioral control, early behavioral problems. If you go back and look at it, there's something called the New York Studies of Temperament, Human Temperament. And they looked at how children behaved and how they grew up to be adults. And there's remarkable similarities between how you are as a child and how you turn out as an adult. So it's early wired also in some way, it's hardwired in you in some way. There is a history very often of juvenile delinquency, and there is a history of criminal tendencies and repeat offenses. It's not a one time. Many people make a mistake once. These guys have no problems making mistakes over and over and over again. They don't seem to learn. So just before I go forward, I talked about Sobraj. How many people here have heard about Charles Sobraj? The older generation has heard about Charles Sobraj. So let me tell you a little bit about Sobraj because it's a very interesting story. Sobraj was the famous bikini killer. And why he was called that is because women in bikinis, predominantly white women, were found dead and washed up on the beaches in Thailand. And you're now talking about the 1970s, the hippie generation, where people were traveling for experience for the first time. And very often they came from the Western world to Asia, which was inexpensive. They came for the experience of drugs. At that time it was especially cannabis and related substances. And there was a whole lifestyle, a kind of a hippie lifestyle associated with that. So you kind of, what shall I say, you stayed with people you had never met, you hung out with people you had never met, you traveled with people you had never met. A little bit like your today's social media generation. You know, you live and travel with people on social media whom you've never met. So it was that kind of time. And he became famous because he had committed, to our knowledge, 8 murders by the time he was finally caught. And he was caught only because there was a Dutch diplomat who became very preoccupied, almost in an Aspergerish way, about 2 Dutch women a Dutch couple dying. And he sort of went chasing after this and finally brought it back to Sobraj. So that's the interesting story of Sobraj. The movies, not the movies, it's a serial. It's called The Serpent. It's 8 episodes of 1 hour each. Definitely worth a binge watch. I would strongly recommend. So now let's look at the hacker. Now the term hacker, if you think about it, these are highly talented individuals. And it came out of the phone freakers in the 1970s and 1980s. Largely, in the cyber security world, hackers are classified as white hats and black hats. The white hat hacker is a self-styled vigilante for justice and the technology consumer, seeking out flaws in IT systems and software and helping to solve them for common good. So he's the guy who works on behalf of people, really for positive reasons. The black hat, on the other hand, is possibly possessed of obsessive compulsive personality profiles who have made an early stage lifestyle choice in their technology career to live in the underbelly of the cyber world and operate from there. And we'll talk a little more about them in a moment. And of course, we have gray hats, people who have black hat skills but operate on behalf of white hat organizations. So they're helping corporates, they're helping governments maintain the integrity of cyberspace. A little bit more about black hat hackers, and I want you to recognize the similarities with the psychopathic personality that I was talking about. They have a self-styled ethico-moral code. They work to their own rules, generally formulated against a backdrop of an us and them mentality. They can be dangerous unless their abilities are channeled in the right direction, because otherwise they will hack systems. And I'll give you an example of a couple of people as we go along. They'll hack as they see fit until they are eventually detected, located, and caught. They often work with criminals, even though they may delude themselves. The same reality orientation problem of the psychopath, that they are working for common good. And they don't always need a reason to hack a website. Sometimes they're just playing around and they want to see what they can get away with. Okay, so it's a very unique subset that acts in a very psychopathic way in the cyberspace. Now this is among the most famous of hackers. His name is Kevin Mitnick. Okay, and he's very interesting for a number of ways. He is now one of the top cybersecurity speakers in the world. He was on the FBI's most wanted because he hacked into the website of 40 major corporations just for the challenge. And now he's a trusted security consultant which those corporations and many others are employing. But one of the very interesting things that he says in his book, Ghost in the Wires, which by the way, he's written with Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple. So he's found himself some very, very eminent friends in his afterlife after being a hacker. What he says, that his actions were more centered on the dark science of social engineering. He was hacking not a system, but the human. He said the flaws are not the system, the flaws are with the human. And you need to, earlier speakers were talking about grooming. He talks about how you get into a workspace system and you groom a human, develop confidence over a period of time, and get them to give up important pieces of information that help you hack the system. So he says, I realize now that what I was doing was much more of social engineering than really technology hacking, as it were. And once again, why I'm bringing this up is because that's the psychopathic quality coming out. It's so important to recognize that even in cyberspace, it's the psychopathic quality that comes out when it comes to how people operate. So he says it's the art of convincing people to give up information they hold when they clearly should not do so. And this is quite interesting. Now here's an entirely different kind of hacker. Okay, this guy is called the UFO hacker, and he claimed that he was searching for evidence of free energy suppression and a cover-up of UFO activity and other technologies that might have been potentially useful to the public. But he managed to hack into nearly 100 United States military and NASA computer systems. And he deleted critical operational files, he rendered weapon systems inoperable, and he demonstrated a level of technological acumen that was unbelievable, very, very high, which is one of the reasons why he was in prison for a very long time in the UK. He should have been extradited to the US. There's only one reason they did not extradite him. The UK Home Secretary said, I'm not extraditing him. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Okay, so this is a different kind of hacker. His intent did not come from a psychopathic space. His intent came from an obsessive need to follow a certain belief system and go into systems. Okay, so therefore, there's another kind of hacker. There's another kind of person who may not necessarily be psychopathic, and that's the other kind of person who exists in the world of cybercrime. And if you broadly look at it, what personalities land up in cybercrime, and therefore we could consider them to be psychopaths in some ways. We've talked about the internet addiction syndromes earlier. There is a certain propensity for people with internet obsessive compulsive disorder in order to do this, and one of the earlier speakers was also talking about how if you spend time on the internet, that's when you become more vulnerable for this. So in a sense, even if you have the fundamental quality in you but you don't spend time, then obviously you are not going to become vulnerable for it. It is when you spend time on the internet. There is antisocial personality disorder, we've talked about that, and obviously the internet is a great space for people like that. But there is also Asperger's syndrome. And what links all these people, in some ways, is the continued repetition of a behavior despite adverse consequences. Or even, I would say, a neurobiological impairment that makes them vulnerable to repeat those behaviors over and over again. And I think that defines what repeated cybercrime is all about. There's not a lot on cyber psychopathy in terms of research, but here is a PhD dissertation. I could only get the abstract because obviously it's not fully published online. But this study showed that when controlling for social context, internet users exhibit...
By Mario being like a well-talked book and the movie being an evergreen. So it made it very interesting, sir. So now I would like to welcome Dr. Satish Babu Garu.
Basically, what I was sharing before also, I would just like to share one personal anecdote. I was asked to write the prologue of a Bengali kind of a research novel by a non-psychiatrist, and he had done almost 6-7 years of thorough research on the origin of Jack the Ripper. And he had said, okay, Dr. Sir, you have to go through the manuscripts because there are some technical issues which I may be erring. So unfortunately, I'm not unfortunate, that's not the right word. In the end, after going through the entire, because he had mapped each and every murder going back to that time, I mean, managed it from the archives in London and all. So ultimately, there was so much of description of hallucinatory behavior. In my prologue, I had to weigh the balance in favor of paranoid schizophrenia, probably. But there were several pointers, especially the brutality of the murders, because he would invariably kill the person, so-called prostitutes, and invariably rip out their intestines. So the brutality would invariably continue much later after the person had actually breathed her last. So that itself will ring a bell for many of us who sometimes think about this high functioning spectrum, primarily because of this lack of empathy. And you will find similar complaints from the mothers of autistic children, the high functioning ones, who would often say that when he hits me, it seems otherwise he's such a quiet child, but when he hits me, he is so brutal that sometimes I feel, does he actually realize that I am his mother? So, very many times, the brutality of the crimes, which are often attributed to this heterogeneous group of quote unquote any antisocial behavior, chalo ASPD. So it is not that, and there are many people, even the photograph was clearly showing it on the face, but many of the high functioning people, it will not be very apparent even on the face. So this autistic spectrum needs to be ruled out. And I personally feel in all spheres, this diagnosis has often taken a backseat, gets misdiagnosed as resistant schizophrenia and all, primarily because our diagnostic systems, nosology hasn't done much justice to the neurodevelopmental disorders that they have grown up. Whenever you think about autistic spectrum till DSM-4 and ICD-10, it almost invariably rings the brain in your mind. It has to be a child who is more or less disabled, cannot fend for himself. But what about the remaining 30% of the high functioning spectrum? And I think although they have changed the diagnosis to autistic spectrum disorder, I still feel that they have not done adequate justice in the nosology to the autistic people grown up. What do they do after 18? What do they do after 20? What do they do with their restrictive interests? And here is cyberspace, which has practically offered them a level playing field. So you have been mocking me, you have been looking at me, you have been deriding me in society. Come, here is my field, come and face me. This is all I have to share.
Making into psychiatric spectrum, they are labeling as a psychiatric illness. They are moral behaviors. Always psychiatric run and make into a psychiatric diagnosis. All the maybe intelligent people or difficult people always try to make it as a psychiatric diagnosis. There is any rationality, you have to make a biological thesis out of that one. After that, you make it as a normal, as well homosexual behavior. You generate all evidences. Suddenly you change into, you make it as a normal. Again, same way, you emotional empathy, there are you make evidence. Later it is they're intelligent people. There is a claim that psychiatrists make a moral behaviors, make into diagnosis.
Thank you. Psychiatrists are also part of society and the times we live in. And what is appropriate at a certain time determines how the psychiatrist is thinking about either any form of psychopathology or how it should be dealt with. So obviously there was a time, for example, when people with epilepsy were put in institutions, or people with schizophrenia were put in institutions. And as you point out, homosexuality was regarded very differently than it is today. And I think this is that inevitable evolution. But there's one other factor that I'd like to point out. I think neuroscience is changing the way we think about mental health. So if, for example, the brain of a person with psychopathic personality is what is behaving differently, okay, can we be moralistic or blame him for his actions? Or are we supposed to be compassionate and help him live better in society or her live better in society. I think we are going to get there, that another 10, 20, 30 years as we understand more distinct psychological concepts like empathy from a neuroscientific perspective. We are able to diagnose it from a neuroscientific perspective. Then our approach, our attitude, everything will have to change. Our classifications will have to change. So I park that there. I share your interest with Jack the Ripper. There's a beautiful book by Patricia Cornwell in which she's actually decoded the entire Jack the Ripper story. And she has identified a highly intelligent person, because the Jack the Ripper was never caught. He just disappeared after 5 murders. There's a highly intelligent person whom she identifies who belongs to the Queen's family who could have been Jack the Ripper. And of course, this debate still goes on in England as who was Jack the Ripper. But many people have pointed out towards this highly intelligent individual who was part of the Queen's family. And just for a little bit of fun, if you do go to London in winter, you must do the Jack the Ripper walk. They actually walk you through the areas of the 5 murders, and they recreate it in such a way that you'll have goose flesh. You'll be thinking, oh my God, I mean, this is what happened in this place. Of course, East London has changed a lot from the time that it happened, but still they do a wonderful job of recreating it. So I strongly recommend the London walks to you if you're going to try and understand Jack the Ripper.
I think we'll wind up the topic.
Thank you, sir.
Psychiatric disorders. So even I wanted to know, I started reviewing the literature, but to use or an aberrant use is the initial assessment. So in the current changing world, I think every mental health professional should be aware of the changes happening in the cyberspace, because they intrude into the presentations, sometimes we may not know that, or if there is a gap between the parents and children. So parents are likely to feel that he is not using it in a proper way. So unless we know, we may not judge whether the use is appropriate or inappropriate. So it is bound on us also to get updated regarding various changes in the cyber world. And there is a need to evaluate the use of internet even in patients with other psychiatric disorders. Not only those who present with excessive use as a complaint, but there is a need to evaluate this. And I think because as my previous speakers also mentioned the internet use has increased manyfold, maybe because of these 3 A's, which is accessible, because once there were situations where you had to go to an internet center, pay an FT amount, use the internet and come back. Now from that stage, it has reached a stage where you can just keep in your hand and use the internet. And affordability, where especially not only Jio, only once Jio has started, everyone has started. There is a slow for us. So that's one. Then there is time when people used to start your downloads during night and it will end up in the morning. But now it has to occur in our phone. So that is also more important. And the place of internet use, where is it being used? Is it at a public place, or is it in the house, or even in the house, is it in the hall, or is it in the bedroom where he is alone, whether he is kept, locks himself or not. That also can give a clue that, and any desire to post, what to post and where to post. And person's awareness about excessive use or need to cut down. So this can also give us some clue, not only what the family members has observed, even from the patient's point of view. So when it comes to the evaluation of the content, so these are the one, if you take the internet gaming disorder, so the game related factors. So how many times you play, number of hours spent on playing the game, and preferred location for gaming. So is it along with the friends in their house or online, and names of preferred gaming. So there are many games which I think we ourselves don't know which people, the children or the persons who are using it are more labeled. And beliefs about gaming and motivation. Many say that we get more improvement, more pleasure when I go from one step to the other step. So they feel something good that they have achieved something. So the importance of games in personal life, including work life, social life and family life, should also be collected. Assess social factors and activities that support gaming. So does the patient have any hobbies apart from gaming other than the computer? And the importance of bonds formed with people. Are there any good friends or relationship within the family, the time within the family, or how much time all the members of the family can be interacted. So these are some of the games like multiplayer, online battle arena, where people can sit at multiple places and play, and massively multiplayer online role-playing games where you can give your name and that is your identity. You become one of the character in the game, and first-person shooters. So this is another regarding the content of evaluation. Cyber porn addiction, it can be two types. It can be a receptive one or it can be an interactive one. So in a receptive one, where person takes only information and views. So there is no interaction with the other side of it. So he only views or seeks information. In the interactive one, he uses websites or social networkings for engaging in virtual or sexually charged relationships. So this also do come under cyber porn addiction. So where even virtual sexual addictions are very common. And suicidal behavior. So websites which are visited, especially patients who are suffering from depression. So if they are being visited, websites visited and the content viewed. Cyber suicide, like suicide promoted by websites, these are present, they should be assessed and have to be taken into consideration during the planning of management. So because they can lead to or maintain the problematic internet use. So I tell evaluation of psychopathology is also important really in regard to the onset of symptoms, relapse of symptoms, or symptoms as an outcome of internet use, and knowledge about symptoms, illness and internet search, especially in those suffering from hypochondriacal illness, where they are likely to using the internet to study. I open a YouTube to search for a channel. So I open, I get some advertisement, I get distracted and move away. So even recently there was a news in the news channel that a person has filed a case in Supreme Court against the YouTube, where he says, I wanted to study, I opened YouTube, I get all nonsense advertisements, so I could not study, get me a compensation. So, but the Supreme Court bluntly refused it and instead it filed the client. So these are the situations which patients are likely to deviate from. And the type of online activity access. Is it email or is it chatting or is it any pornography site, even stocks, eBay, random web surfing, so or is it shopping, online shopping? How long each session lasts? So it is when the client has to record each of the session. So what happened after you have used the internet? So what is the outcome of such internet session? So what actions were completed? What you intended, did you complete it or not? So what were postponed? So what activities were interrupted? And how did you feel after you stopped using the internet? So having such a detailed log can help us in identifying high risk situations which can be prevented so that they can not go back, or that can lead to excessive use. So this is one such a record where client can write the date, time, event, online activity, what he has accessed, the duration and the outcome. So just like in food addiction where we there should be some objectivity like recovery, what is that, because I have joined in a food addiction recovery program, so I lost weight, so there is something that there is beneficial in the treatment. So this is my objective, or I am taking lesser number of calories. So likewise, internet addictions, to objectively measure, we have only the reduced online hours and abstinence from any contact with problematic online activities. This should be an automatic online behavior. It is starting afresh. I mean, again, I am starting how to use the internet and regain control. How to use, what to use and what not to use. So that is computer restructuring. So entire reorganization of how one actually uses the computer. So for this we can do something like we are deleting the bookmarks or favorite files, which can be visible whenever you open a browser. So if you remove the bookmarks, so it will not appear to you. So that could be one way where we can at least they're kept out of your awareness or sight. So set clear time management goals with the client. So definitely this will be the number of hours I should use. So after that, whatever may be the reason, I should stop using it. So encourage to take routine computer breaks, like you getting up from the computer at regular intervals, or using a timer or an alarm to remind that this much as time has elapsed from starting, and taking a stroll through the office. Even when you are in office, you can just get up, go here and there, meet some friend and come back, and go see what a family member is doing in the next room. So this can be encouraged to follow to take routine breaks from the internet use. And use of filtering software is one method where you can it can help you to stop from using some unwanted sites like nanny, net nanny, cyber patrol or surf control, which will automatically block a multitude of online applications. And sometimes when they stop immediately, they feel that okay, maybe initially there may be some negative reactions, but once they feel that we are not we are comfortable by not seeing it, so they may feel that they have gained some control over the use, and clients feel empowered to control the temptations. And it's also necessary during the behavior therapy to evaluate the various non-computer activities like any hobbies, exercise, physical exercise, hobbies offline, not online, and spiritual activities, meditation, which should be encouraged, and we should ask the patient to involve these activities in their daily life, and promoting non-computer activities related to social relationships with others, social functioning, work functioning, and they are asked to maintain a daily living timetable which can be followed. So after the behavior therapy comes the cognitive restructuring. So where we identify and address the maladaptive cognitions, so which are very important in starting. So which can intensify and perpetuate the individual's internet addictions, like all or none thinking. So nobody loves me offline, and the online is the only place where I am respected. So this is where self-concepts favoring online self, where the patient thinks that I'll be respected only there, but he never tries, but which is in fact not true, may not be true. Or distorted thoughts about self. I am worthless offline, but in online world I am someone. So like I cannot get marks in the exams, but I can go up at multiple levels in a very tough game, which is more tougher than study. So patients give such rationalizations too. So I will never get sober. There is nothing that I can be. There is no one that someone will get me out of this problem. Or the other way around, I will never relapse. Okay, I have now recovered. I don't need any of your help. So I need not have any help from you. So I don't need to attend this program. So this cognitive distortion should be there. Like something like overgeneralization. So I tried, but I couldn't do it. So the person may think that I can never change. So it is better that there is no one who could help me. So I will not seek help from anyone. So personalization can be one such cognitive distortion. Maladaptive cognition such as selective abstraction, magnification are associated with addictive internet use. They may exaggerate their difficulties and minimize their corrective action. So by exaggerating the difficulties, so they don't seek that they can help. So many feel cognitive better treated by others in the virtual world and feel psychological discomfort or dissatisfaction with their real lives. So this could also be a cognitive bias. Parents don't understand me, so, but my friends in the online world do encourage me by liking me or raising a thumb, anything. So such cognitive distortions give permissions to engage in internet use, so which should be tackled. So by doing cognitive restructuring, so in this initially the client should be aware of the cognitive distortions, then they can challenge these thoughts by keeping under the microscope and testing it, and it helps the clients understand that they are using the internet to avoid situations or feelings. So just to escape from suffering, just to escape from anxiety, just to escape from depression, I am using. So this should be made understand to the clients. So help them re-evaluate how rational and valid these interpretations are. Each cognitive distortion should be tested. So which will help the clients attack the assumptions and interpretations that keep them online. So re-scripting the negative thinking. So it also helps them to identify the major problems or consequences. You can ask the clients what are to list the major 5 problems that has disturbed you due to internet addiction. And at the same time, if that is not there, what 5 benefits you could get because of stopping the problematic internet use. So we should request the client to be honest as possible, because preparing this list, based on this list only we can plan our management. So this kind of clear-mindedness during the assessment of consequences, which should be taught to the client. So for recovery and for relapse. So this will help the client in both the ways. So during the initial phase, the focus should be on denial, which is very commonly seen not only with this but with any other addictions. So once we deal with denial, then even the clients are mostly ambivalent about the treatment, whether this particular help, whether this is a disorder or not. Just I'm using internet excessively. So what will happen? So whether I should go there or I should stop. Whether there will be any help to me or will there not be any help to me. So initially clients may enter with mixed feelings because they have not taken full responsibility of the behavior. Once we start the therapy, then we have to make sure that they take the responsibility. The client often feels that internet is the healthy outlet only to rationalize the behavior. So I'm feeling comfortable, why should I suffer? So it is our duty to explain that this may also lead to further negative consequences. And sometimes the clients also feel that they are dragged into therapy by a loved one. Just because of my parents I am coming here, there is no use that you are going to be of any help to me. So sometimes they come very enthusiastically during the initial phases, but once after 2-3 sessions, then they message where they may minimize the same year. So I don't have any problem right now, so I don't need any. So that also should be addressed. So clients are helped to take the ownership of the problem. It is your problem. So because it is going to have negative impact on your life. So you accept that it is your problem. Unless he accepts or owns the problem, he cannot stick to the structured program or internet time management plan. So if they cannot address it. So this is one of the most important aspect during this cognitive restructuring phase where the client should reach before going to the next session. And the third phase will be the harm reduction therapy. Just stopping the behavior is not enough to say I am recovered. So now I am not using the internet excessively. So I am recovered. So or I am not using the substance, I am recovered. So it's like only a detoxification which we have done. So the other things, complete recovery is investigating the underlying issues that led up to the compulsive behavior and resolving those issues in a healthy manner. So this is the goal of harm reduction therapy. Then only we can say that person is completely recovered. So HRT used to identify and address any coexisting factors associated with the development of internet addiction. So these factors can be personal factors, situational factors, social factors, psychiatric factors, or any occupational factors. So all these should be tackled in a healthy way. So it is based on the belief that addictions don't develop. It is not a single factor that lead to addiction. So there are many interactions between the bio, psycho, and social factors. So this is one presumption where HRT is used. So and in HRT, it should be non-judgmental. You can be curious to know about the problems and how to address them, but don't be judgmental. This is wrong, this is right. So you can get it. So HRT is used to address the coexisting issues too. So sometimes like this, cyberspace becomes a fantasy world that can take them away from their problems, which will have some reinforcing effect in the form of a negative reinforcement where my sufferings are kept away. Then which involves identifying and treating, which has led to these negative consequences, by the consequences from which the patient wants to avoid should be addressed, so that HRT sessions will be focusing on this, raising the awareness of those issues that led to compulsive internet use. So these are the things which have to be addressed in HRT. So they are important in preventing the client going back to the addiction. So clients are encouraged to collaborate in the setting up the treatment and choosing goals and strategies. So they will be more involved in at what speed they want to go. So these issues can be personal, social, situational, or career issues. So this reduces harmful consequences of internet abuse and helps the client adapt new, healthier coping strategies. So some solutions, this is not exhaustive, but this is like clients with low self-esteem. So they can work towards finding healthier ways of dealing with these feelings without internet. So suppose I am able to achieve higher levels in the game. So the same can be applied. So you can do the same thing by achieving higher grades in your school or higher grades in the sports in the schools, physical sports. So in such a way, you can increase your self-esteem. If there is relationship troubles, especially between couples, then couple therapy or couple counseling can be addressed instead of client seeing towards cyber sex. Use porn at work to handle job stress. If stress is the factor, then patient may be taught more the strategies for effective stress management. So if there are multiple addictions, they too have to be addressed along with the underlying compulsive behavior, which is responsible for all the addictions. And if there are career troubles, we can help them to investigate for the new job opportunities which are other career opportunities. So to summarize, this is a comprehensive and unique approach. First phase it deals with behavior modification. Second phase of CBT deals with cognitive restructuring, and the third phase deals with the factors that prevent client from moving back to addiction. And note about this hepatic program. This is a Spanish language, but the English translation is the individualized psychotherapy program for addiction to information and communication technologies. So the target of this population of this program are young adolescents between 12 to 18 years with internet gaming disorders. So this is a 6 months program which will be aimed at. It has 6 therapeutic modules which will concentrated on the module 1 will be about psychoeducation and motivation, where we deal with the motivational aspects for change, goal setting, psychoeducation with the adolescents and with the family. And module 2 deals with addiction treatments as usual adapted to IGD, like addiction stimulus control, coping responses, cognitive restructuring, problem solving related to addiction and exposure. Then intrapersonal any conflicts, identity problems, self-esteem problems, the level of intelligence, emotional coping skills, problem solving skills. So if there are any differences, these can be addressed in the intrapersonal modules. The interpersonal module between how the communication, the level of assertiveness style and answering styles. So this should be also be addressed during the module 4. And then the family communication, limits establishment and bonds establishments. So this in the 5th module, and module 6, creation of new lifestyle from after de-addiction from the internet gaming disorders, like observations related to the improvements, alternative activities and relapse prevention. So this program, as I said, it's 6 months comprising 20 to 45-minute weekly sessions, each for both individuals and the families. So this has been studied with great effectiveness in Spanish adolescents. And a small note about the pharmacological management. So though we cannot say that there is no single effective drug which can be used in all the internet addiction. So this is, it is based on the premise that the involvement of the reward system and the other brain regions, and also the current explanation of use of obsessive compulsive behavior or the impulsive behavior underlying the factors which lead to addiction. So some pharmacological intervention have been tried in various. So this is one antidepressants where depression is frequently encountered. So especially SSRIs, escitalopram, which has been tried in, but all the studies are involving very small sample. So this particular study was only on 20 patients. So this was a 10-week open label study where 65% showed reduction in the amount of time spent online, and then they were randomized after 10 weeks. So in 2 groups, one with the placebo, one in the escitalopram, but still the effect of decreased time spent on internet continued even in the placebo group. And bupropion has been tried in game addiction patients with some significant reductions in both craving and the time spent. So antipsychotic drugs have been tried with, I think olanzapine did not have any effect, so it was proved ineffective against pathological gambling. And quetiapine showed some beneficial efficacy, but in combination with citalopram, but whether it is an antidepressant effect or an antipsychotic effect, because it was used only around 50 to 150 mg. And opioid receptor antagonist, especially the naltrexone, it was found to be effective in when added with sertraline. There was only a case report which combined treatment effectively induced a remission lasting for 3 years. And psychostimulants, especially when it coexists with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, this has been from the assumption that both share ADHD and the addiction share a common underlying etiology. So methylphenidate has been tried in ADHD children addicted to video gaming, and which showed improvement both in attention and also decrease in the time of gaming. And glutamate antagonists like memantine has showed some promise, but not so. Others like in impulsive valproate has been tried, but currently there is no single approved drug that has been proved to be effective in internet addiction. So to conclude, cyberpsychiatric disorders are on the rise, and there is an urgent need for an effective treatment. So assessment of the client is the key aspect of management. CBT is the mainstay of treatment currently. Pharmacotherapy may be a supportive kind of therapy in reducing the negative symptoms, and a combination of these two therapies may be recommended as the most effective method as of today. Thank you.
Good and comprehensive presentation, sir. Any questions? Sir, Mike.
Thank you. That was very exhaustive and comprehensive. Anything on the role of neuromodulation?
I have not come across any such studies.
Because there are protocols for addiction that we use in some other circumstances. There are protocols for ADHD that we use, but I have not come across anything specific for internet.
But definitely, I think when neuromodulation.
Whether the biological correlates for addiction disorders in that sense. Does internet addiction come out as a different entity altogether? Okay, or is there any anything which shows us that these are the neurobiological correlates of addiction which we know, and this internet addiction falls in the same thing category, or is it something which is different, which has to have a different category altogether, so that there are specialized treatments available?
So as of today, different addiction. These are for the other substance addiction. It's just like any other behavioral addiction.
So regarding the just last question about the neurobiological correlates, how was it's in line with the other substance addictions, and as how unique is internet addiction? In that sense, up to so far consensus with the evidence, we come up with the GDNF is a very unique neurotransmitter which was having of integrated in the neurobiologically have recruited in the pathways, and the same reward pathways as having of implicated with others in line with other substances, and significantly the DRD2 gene polymorphism, certain COMT polymorphisms also having of integrated, and importantly another more differentiating factor here, they are the internet addiction having a high in psychobiological immunological response also. So like in any other stimulation, but here the internet, people autonomic nervous system is having of differentially responded when compared to other. This is my study was going on, so that's based on that. And the parasympathetic nervous system is a very having of lower responses, whereas sympathetic drive is very high responsive when the stimulus of the internet, of all games, even the various contents of the internet variables. Thank you.
Non-essential. So it's all about essential and non-essential usage. So any idea about how to, we know chat history and all that stuff, but is there any specific sure shot method by which you can go to the mobile as a clinician and actually find out, any clue during your presentation whether we could assess how much time has been spent on what site?
So I don't think, no sir, one internet immigrants, there will be a clash.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to be sitting on the hot seat to decide whether it is rational use or there is a problematic use. So, but exactly measuring what sites, amount of time spent on each thing, and
Another problem is that what I feel that there is a concept of insight also. I mean, if you look at on the compulsive spectrum also, so a child who has grown up with the digital generation was pushed into forcibly into 2 years of online classes and all, and suddenly once the physical classes have started, suddenly the parents have started saying no, now you don't need to use, this is excess or whatever.
yes.
So for them it is a behavior, it is a quest, just like going to the playground in our childhood days or chatting with friends. So it is very difficult for the child or the young adolescent to perceive it as something which is excessive and irrational. It is only a value judgment passed by an older generation, no, this is not good. So there, if the element of insight is not there, would it not be very difficult to actually do something on the cognitive aspect also?
Yes.
What should be the ideal time for a child to
Suppose even if we allow it for half an hour or allow it to do online gambling, so it's not about the time perspective, but it's also about the content, which also is very important. So that is one which is very important. I don't think there is guidance which WHO has framed, especially during COVID.
I think IAP has come up with the guidelines, but the Indian Association of Pediatrics,
Yeah.
I think they come up with the guidelines. And follow.
indicators towards
Yeah, 2 hours a day in a mail.
But again, age-wise it was different. I think.
Age-wise it was different, but it has to be used in an appropriate way.
Arupada Didu Medical College, MD from NRI Medical College, DPM from SVL, Dr. Mahesh R. Gowda.
TLN Murthy Rao Award for Best Outgoing Student. He is a consultant psychiatrist at Spandana and director of Spandana Healthcare. He is the DNB program coordinator at Spandana, past president of IPS Karnataka and past treasurer of IPS Karnataka and permanent editor IAPP. About 70 publications in Index Journal, partner in Tele Arogya video consultation platform.
The topic, legal and forensic aspects of cyber psychiatry, is really a challenging one, I would say, because we are dealing with behavioral addictions just in a gray area, both in terms of diagnosis and treatment. Especially when you are trying to label a behavior which is a normal behavior for majority of the population, and when do you label exactly that to be a disorder, and what are the legal implications of me labeling someone as suffering from an internet addiction disorder? These are questions which often arise. At the cost of psychologizing or medicalizing normal behavior sometimes, we may land up in some legal or forensic issues when you try to label someone as suffering from this disorder. I am sure Dr. Mahesh Gowda, who has got quite a bit of experience in facing the legal issues with reference to psychiatric disorders, would throw more light on this. Mahesh.
Thank you, sir. I think access to internet so big times. I was also trying to revisit what my other colleague Dr. Krishnamurthy was talking about the moral aspects, and here I'm here to say that law is amoral, so you don't have any underlying thing of what's good and what is moral here. what's legally correct is all that matters. If you go back and look at the dilemma that we had, I also have raised hands on both the occasions. So the choice I had was to save 5 people and I decided to kill 1 person. So I will be charged with culpable homicide not amounting to murder. So it's 304A there. It is rash and negligent act of mind that needs. I don't have intention to kill this person. It's the only lenience I'm going to get from the law. But I will be charged with culpable homicide not amounting to murder. All homicides are murders, but culpable homicide where you didn't have the actual intent to kill people, it may not be a murder actually, but you're charged in different sections. So it's not going to be lenient in that way. So having a moral conscience is good and we do a lot of things, but when it comes to judicial interpretation, they're going to be extremely harsh. And if you look at what practitioners are going through, just not having a proper informed consent and documentation itself is enough for them to punish us. They feel that the client whom we are dealing with is not adequately informed of the choices and they were not given a free will to decide. That itself is enough to cause for medical negligence. So just to look at what is legal and what is forensic. So anything to do with laws, even if there's no crime, is legal aspects of it. And we are actually saying there's forensic aspect, that means there's an assumption that crime has actually happened and we are dealing with the consequence of what happened and looking at the precedents and also looking at post-mortem of the scenario there. So forensic would deal with assumption that there's actually crime that's happened. And if you look at what the forensic or legal aspects of cyber-psychiatry is going to deal with, as a psychiatrist I'm going to practice using internet, I'm going to use telepsychiatry, so I will be covered under cyber-psychiatry. And I will also be looking at effects of cyber crimes. Psychopathology related to increased internet use is the next aspect that I have to talk about. Assessing the digital footprints of clients and trying to understand client in a better perspective is my other aspect of it. And I could actually be called as a witness for forensic psychiatric evaluation that deals with cyber psychiatry. So this is a whole list of gamut of interface where I will be dealing with as a legal person when I go to deal with cyber-related crimes. There are a lot of laws here, so I thought I'm just going to say it's very boring if you're not interested in law and legal aspects. It's extremely boring to look at numbers, to look at definitions and all those things. It really means nothing. Unless we are actually charged with one of these offenses, then only we realize the impact of these sort of numbers. So I'll just briefly touch upon the provisions of law, look at all the laws that are pertaining to cyber psychiatry. So the first is the Information Technology Act. It's also called IT Act. It could be misleading for Income Tax Act also. So I'm saying Information Technology Act 2001. And it was amended in 2008. This is the first act that you must remember about. Next is the Information Technology Rules. We have intermediary guidelines. We have the amendments to these acts. We have Indian Penal Code 1860 and subsequent amendments that actually cover certain aspects of cyber psychiatry, so it's also relevant. Briefly I'm going to talk about telepsychiatry guidelines because we are covered with telepsychiatry and practice here. So if you look at, we were using internet for so many years, but only in 2000 we got an act which actually covered information technology related issues. Till that time we were using, but we didn't understand the impact. So we were doing a lot of transferring a lot of information from one person to the other person. It would happen in the government space also. So earlier if you look at, everything had to be a paper and I had to sign and give it to them, and that was the only official correspondence they would consider for government purpose. Now even an email is sufficient only because of this sort of amendment they've got in. They've actually given a legal recognition to this sort of transaction for electronic data exchange. That's why the whole list of provisions in the IT Act came in to facilitate electronic filing of so many applications, forms, certification that happens. So this is the purpose of having the Information Technology Act. So particular reference to some sections here. Section 66 applies to anything that is described as dishonest and fraudulent, and it has a punishment up to 3 years and also fine of 5 lakhs. So they've gone ahead to describe what a dishonesty would be, what a fraudulent act would be. Subsequently in section 66A, they defined everything else except the words offensive and menacing. So whenever they don't define, it is left to the discretion of the judiciary to understand what this concept means and to have, these are grey areas. So these are the two terms that are actually not described. The rest of the thing is described, and anything that is dishonest and fraudulent and they use the IT means to transfer this sort of information amounts to an act of crime and punishable up to 3 years or up to 5 lakh rupees fine. The next important section here would be 66E, which talk about taking pictures of private areas, publishing or transmitting them without the person's consent. So having the person's consent. So for example, I would be in a relationship with somebody and you would have taken independent, intimate pictures of this sort of thing. I have my consent of being pictured in that photo frame at that particular moment. But I wouldn't have consented for this sort of transmission. So if it is actually transmitted later by the person involved in this sort of filming or in this sort of act of transmission, he's actually liable to be punished up to again 3 years and 2 lakh rupees fine. So consent is most important here. Consent for taking the photo, consent for actual transmission. And next section that is important here is section 67, which talks about electronically publishing obscenities. And here the imprisonment is up to 5 years and fine is up to 10 lakhs. So if you look at the laws can be so stringent, everything is defined, left to the discretionary of the court whenever things are not defined, and the law specifically says that these are all punishable offences. Next is the IT rules. Whenever you have an act to interpret the act and looking at the context of whatever is happening, there is a clause where the government at the state level will have discretion. The central also will have discretion to interpret this sort of acts and form rules. So the first thing that they did was in 2011, they brought about reasonable security practices and procedures and sensitive personal data and information rules of 2011. So this actually